Good afternoon. Aloha, folks, and welcome. All of you in the room here today, and a warm welcome to folks on Zoom and that on our YouTube channel. Watching that. My name is Thomas Elbert. I'm Executive Director of National Wildlife Refuge. The co-host for this monthly series, gathering our community together, meeting conversation all for your interest. So, quick little monthly plug about who we are, what we do, how we help, and then we'll pass this over to him. Double quick check of let us know if you can read okay. Patty's working.
They said it there.
Because it wasn't on.
Oh.
It was picking up that one. So my apologies, folks. That should be a little better for you in the Zoom room. My apologies. Let us know if that's not working, but turning it on makes all the difference in the world. So, okay. Thanks for your patience, folks. Okay, we'll just dive in here. Again, this is a partnership, this series, between Friends of Kauai Wildlife Refuges and the Friends, or the Events Committee for the Princeville at ʻAlae Community Association. We get this lovely space and their technology and the use of Patty and one of her many hats. And anyway, it's another example of great collaboration and partnership, helping to expand the work that we do. As a Friends group, we've been around for over 43 years, one of the oldest Friends groups in the entire fish and wildlife system. And we're really honored to have had a long, long history of support for our refuges. The three on our island include ʻAlae, Hula'ia, and Kilauea Point. And if you're not as familiar with them, ʻAlae and Hula'ia are spaces that are dedicated to the species we're going to talk about today, are critically endangered wetland birds. And so these are really important spaces. I'll let Helen share more about that and why they're so unique. But as a Friends group, this is where a lot of our energy is being directed to help support the wetland bird species and the resources that Fish and Wildlife team needs to do the effective management of those areas. And that's why we're here to help fill in those puka in their budget and help get this work done to say, not in our lifetime are we going to lose these species. So on the other side of our spectrum are our seabirds that we help protect out at Kilauea Point. And of course, that's also open to visitation and is one of the most spectacular spots on the North Shore. And essentially, so that's our what. That's what gets us up in the morning, and our how. How we show up as a Friends group is basically generating funding through earned income of every dollar that is sold at our nature store out at Kilauea Point turns into revenue for our mission. And in addition to that, the generosity of friends and supporters in our community. So generating funding that goes directly into the work of Fish and Wildlife, providing in-kind staffing and community outreach like we're doing today, building, sustaining, and bringing together a community and sharing the work of Fish and Wildlife. A couple high points of the programs that we're really proud of is we, as a Friends group, help pay for rehabilitation services for any bird from our refuge that is collected and is sick or injured, gets transferred into the incredible expert care of Save Our Shearwaters. And this year, that's at a cost of $50,000 that we as a Friends group are able to underwrite thanks to the generosity of our community. So huge mahalo for every bird in our community. With the numbers of birds that we have, every bird counts. And we're really able to, so honored to have the resources to respond to these birds in such an intimate way. As well, community outreach, going out there, spreading the word. Getting people to activate around this work starts with awareness. So letting them know about the 3 national wildlife refuges on island and the other protected species that our birds rely upon. And then from that awareness and engagement, they can find where they want to plug in and help and be a part of this. Environmental education is a big key to the future of wildlife conservation, and we kind of cross the gamut of it. We have one of our expert volunteers here, Tina's in the room here, who helps engage with our keiki program, life cycle of the MOLI program, engaging third graders, and learning about that iconic species. And it culminates with a free field trip out at Kilauea Point, creating these inspirational experiences for these young people. And as one of those things that we sort of help pay for and overcome, our Friends group underwrites the cost of the buses to get the young students there. On the other end of the spectrum of education, we have an annual scholarship fund, and this year we are planning and hoping to distribute $30,000, which is what we did last year as well, to 14 amazing, bright young people. You're seeing their awesome faces here that are really part of that future of wildlife conservation, and we're so honored to be able to make that commitment to building tomorrow's conservation team. And this happens to be the time period when the application process is open. So if you're talking to folks out in the community and know anyone, applications are open through April 30th, and that's available on our website. The big chunk of what we do is basically help fill in holes in the budget of Fish and Wildlife that from fixing a tractor to purchasing supplies to underwriting a service contract, any number of things that they need to get done to fulfill the operational needs of their organization that they don't have the money for. They come to us and ask our board of directors on a monthly basis, could you please help fulfill the needs of this program? And we're so honored to be able to say yes more and more and more, thanks to all of you. And last year we allocated over $200,000 in direct funding requests for Fish and Wildlife. It was an unprecedented amount for us, only possible thanks to the generosity of our community. So huge, huge mahalo to everyone who steps up and is a part of this work and is just an instrumental part of why we're here. With that, if you're not already a part of our Ohana of supporters, please visit us out at Kilauea Point, shop our nature store. Like I said, all of that turns into earned income for us. There are some really awesome volunteer opportunities that get you out into these protected spaces and close to the wildlife we're talking about. Donating, joining as a member is obviously most welcome. If you're not already on our email list, please click onto our website, and there's a spot right there for you folks online to make sure that you can continue to receive our newsletter and news about this monthly series and stay connected to our community. With that, a quick look towards the continuation of this Princeville Mo'olelo series. We have a special treat now. We did a little reshuffling. If you were here or zoomed in last time, we did a little reshuffling of the schedule because we have James Woodward, who is an amazing lighthouse restoration specialist and historian. And he is on island, or going to be on island in April. And so for April 21st, he's going to join us for a really special session talking about the restoration work. This is a fairly recent picture of our lighthouse. So if you haven't been out there recently, she's getting the second biggest facelift of her 113-year-old history. Aloha, welcome. And he's going to talk about the very specialized work that he and his team is doing to bring that historic gem back to life for us. So that's going to be April 21st. And then KISS is then going to join us in May, on May 12th, for a talk about ohia, rapid ohia death, and all of the kind of ecosystem of forest birds and how that's interrelated with plant life. And we're going to mix it up a little bit with a little bit of hands-on activity through a forest journaling workshop. So if you're here in the room with us, we'll get to do a little crafty exercise as well. So we're going to mix it up a little bit. So anyway, that's a peek ahead to where we're headed. But today, and I do apologize, I did not print out your bio. So if you could say a few words about yourself. What I can say is that Helen is amazing. She just shows up in so many different ways, bringing people together, creating partnerships, is just an extraordinarily well-versed individual on the needs of our wildlife and is getting stuff done and helping save our wildlife. I'm so grateful to call you a friend and colleague, and we're very grateful to have you here today.
Thank you very much.
Round of applause for Helen, please.
All right, thank you. Well, evening, everybody. It's lovely to be here. And in terms of my bio, I've been working in conservation since around the year 2000. Weirdly, I was doing a completely different career. I was actually working for British Airways as a product manager, and I won a competition to go and do a week with the conservation organization that British Airways supported. And I was just like, wait, this is a job? People get to do this every day? So I'm sure that's not what they had in mind. They just invested a ton in their graduate trainee, and I basically got back, quit, went to Africa, did a conservation project as a volunteer, and kind of the rest is history. So here I am.
Well, thank you. I could not have done that as well.
You could have just made it up. So yes, I now work for Pacific Birds. So we are a habitat joint venture. I should probably start, whoops, wrong way. Start moving us forward. So that's our logo up there in the top. We are celebrating the ʻAlae ʻUla. This is our big year for the ʻAlae ʻUla. Lots of events around this bird to just try and raise the profile. Because there's a lot of people who will see these birds all over the place and have no idea that it's unique to Hawaii, super special, culturally important, and that's what we want to change. We want people to see it, both visitors and local people, and be like, I just saw an ʻAlae ʻUla, cool. So that's the plan. So habitat joint ventures are across the entire US. Ours is massive. We include part of Canada. We go from the West Coast all the way down to California, in theory, all of the Pacific Islands, but we are a team of 6 people. So we really focus on specific habitats. So I'm the only person in Hawaii, and I only do wetlands and waterbirds just in the main Hawaiian Islands, just to try and make it manageable. And these are just some examples of the kind of thing we do. And the reason why we focused on the area, we actually did, when I started, we asked the conservation community, what are the niches? Like, what do you need? And this was the spot that was missing. You know, there's lots of people working on seabirds. There's lots of people working on forest birds, but there are people working on these birds, but there wasn't anyone kind of coordinating all those efforts. So that's what I do. And it's becoming increasingly clear that that's really important, because the birds got to real lows in like the 50s and 60s. We've seen pretty sustained increases, but the last 5 to 10 years, it's been kind of peaking back down again. And that is pretty worrying. It's partly because we've lost a lot of wetland acreage. We've lost tons of loʻi acreage. I think there's only an estimated 300 or 400 acres of taro on the landscape now, whereas it used to obviously be feeding the entire island chain. And these birds have suffered as a consequence. So the focus on the ʻAlae ʻUla is really because of that pretty scary figure, 712. If you've ever observed ʻAlae ʻUla, you can guess that that's probably a bit of an underestimate, because they're cryptic, they like to hide. So we're probably undercounting them. But the state waterbird counts are really consistent. They do the same thing every time, twice a year. And so even if it's an undercount, we're showing a steep decline. So the bottom line is there might be 700, there might be 1,000, but that is a worrying number, and it's going in the wrong direction. And we'll talk a bit more about how they're so culturally important, but they're known as the fire bringer. They have these really long, cool toes to help them walk on vegetation. And they've been part of banding and tracking studies to figure out, where are they going? And the answer is not very far. They are there's never been recorded, that, at least that I know of, inter-island movement. They do move. There was a study by Lisa Rourke which showed them moving from different wetlands in Oahu, but not off island, and not very much. They're mostly hanging out in their wetlands. They tend to move along the Alvai instead of flying long distances. So they're pretty sedentary. That said, one of my colleagues studies power line collision, and he does find these birds colliding with power lines. So they must be flying at some level. at night. So just to sort of underline that the figures there, you know, you can see this general upward trend, and then we're kind of going down, and hopefully we're seeing a bit of a turn back, but this is what we're worried about. These are the statewide declines for all of our water birds. And this is the place close to all of our hearts, ʻAlae National Wildlife Refuge. You can see that playing out here as well. And we all know that is not for want of the incredibly hard work of our fish and wildlife staff on the ground. Those guys work so hard. It's really a question of resources. You know, they are stretched thin. There's not really enough money to do what needs to be done. And some of their management units, they can't manage them because they haven't got the resources. And we're starting to see the impact of that on bird numbers. And ʻAlae is so important. You know, it's been the place that drove recovery, but unfortunately that's this big challenge because it can also be the place that drives a downward trend if it's not doing well. So cannot underline enough what Thomas was saying, how important the Friends group is at filling those holes, how supportive they've been, and how lucky we are to have the staff that we have there at the refuge who are working so hard to kind of do more on less, and whatever we can do as a community to support them, I think that's what we're going to need to do. So thinking about the ʻAlae ʻUla, these little cutesy pies, they used to be across the whole state. They blinked out on Hawaii Island in the 1880s. And I was talking to Kavika Winter about this, about, you know, why did they remain on Kauaʻi and they remained on Oʻahu, but they're blinking out in Hawaii Island first, and then Maui Nui. And, you know, he was just talking about fresh water. We are abundant fresh water, the land of water and poi, and Hawaii Island a bit more arid, so they were probably a little bit more stressed. Lost them on Molokai, and then they got down to these scary lows in the 1960s. And the threats are not rocket science. I bet, you know, I could ask everybody, what do you think the threats are? And you'd be like, predators and habitat management, or rather not enough habitat management, habitat loss from development, invasive species. And it's the scary thought is that we might lose them from one of the two islands where they remain. So we did a sort of assessment with all of our conservation partners, and this is the detail which is in our strategic plan. But you can see predators came out like the biggest factor. Everybody was in agreement that predators were the biggest risk. And this is from our ʻAlae ʻUla competition at St. Teresa's School. This was one of their entries. I love it so much. So cute. And they also made cute little clay figurines. So yeah, they are so culturally important. And again, these are more images from the art competition. The students were tasked with drawing an ʻAlae ʻUla or any kind of artwork, but it had to have a cultural component. So we just got these absolutely wonderful images. People viewed these birds as aumakua. They offered pest control in the loʻi. You know, they're real survivors, and they would have been there with the Hawaiians as they were working the land, just the same as today. You know, those farmers know the individual birds, and they know how they're doing, whether they nest successfully, and that relationship has been really long throughout history. So as part of the plan to reintroduce birds to a third island, which I'll talk a bit more of in a minute, Noah Gomes put together an ethno-historic report about everything he could find in the Hawaiian records on ʻAlae ʻUla. And David Mallow is one of the key sources for this information. He wrote Mo'olelo Hawaii, which gives most of the information that many people know about the Mo'olelo and the cultural connections. So I just wanted to read a a little bit about what David said. Few birds are as prominent in Hawaiian legend and spiritual tradition as the ʻAlae. And there are several birds that live in saltwater or fresh ponds. The ʻAlae has black feathers, yellow legs, and a red forehead. Some are white. That's interesting. I'm presuming he might be meaning the frontal shield, but I guess it could be albinism too. The bird is thought a god. Many people hold religious services to them, and other people eat them. So it's this like, duality of like, for some people they're a god, and for other people they're dinner, but the people that thought they were a god probably really helped with the population increases. So we're just gonna play, do I just press again for, Noah's just gonna describe a little bit about his report because nobody can really do it better than him, but if you get a chance, you can literally just Google ethnohistoric report on the ʻAlae ʻUla and Noah's name, and it is fascinating. He collected all the stories and they're really cool.
Hello, everyone. My name is Noah Gomes. Helen asked me to talk a little bit about an ethnohistorical report that I did a couple of years ago in 2024. It's already a couple of years ago, can't believe it. About ʻAlae ʻUla. So I was asked to do that report by Hoku Kori, who if I remember correctly, was contracted by DLNR to do some ethnography about potential release sites for the ʻAlae ʻUla, or translocation sites to establish new populations throughout the archipelago, throughout the Pai'aina. And anyway, I already had some things from my master's research, which was on the old Hawaiian bird hunters, that I knew about the ʻAlae ʻUla that hadn't been published yet, and so I agreed to work on that report. And it was cool. So I got to talk a little bit about the relationship of ʻAlae ʻUla with Hawaiians in the spiritual sense. It's one of the few birds that we remember their significance really well in spiritual matters, particularly the connection with kapo, hua, and maui. So it was really good to be able to get a feel for what all of the different stories are about those akua, and understand a little bit more about that relationship that I did. There's still a lot of things that are super mysterious that I don't know, but that was cool. And also thinking a little bit more about where the stories were coming from, because there seemed to be a pattern. A lot of the stories seem to have been coming from the drier sides of islands, which was interesting. I think it had to do something with loʻi culture, which is something that previous researchers had found. Greer, I think, was the big one, that ʻAlae ʻUla really associates strongly with loʻi. Even among other native water birds, there are ones that seem to like to be around loʻi more than others. And I think what was also really cool was just trying to look more into the ʻAlae ʻawi, which is another thing that we don't really know a lot about, but it's a kind of ʻAlae that is considered different than ʻAlae ʻUla. The moorhen, the mud hens, as my father would call them, or ʻAlae keʻokeʻo, the coots. In the old days, it seems that certain ʻAlae keʻokeʻo would have different colored frontal lobes. Their beaks and their foreheads, their lai, which is why these birds are called ʻAlae in the first place, because their lai were a different color. They were brown, which is a thing that still happens today. We don't really know a lot about it and why. And supposedly the eggs are different. Inside of the eggs are different. But that's a really interesting thing. So ʻAlae ʻUla and ʻAlae keʻokeʻo, ʻAlae in general, because in the Hawaiian view they're considered closely related, are an interesting bird because we know so much about them. There's a lot we don't know, but compared to other native birds, we know kind of a lot about the traditional relationships. And so that's really special. And it was nice to be able to talk about that kind of thing and put together a report. This is everything that I can find about this particular species, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time with other things, other birds. And maybe one day I'll get the opportunity to. Maybe I'll make a book or something. But anyway, I think that's all I have to share about this topic.
Yep, so maybe we look out for his book, hopefully coming soon. So in Noah's report, there was one Mo'olelo that really stood out to me because I recognized the place name because I've been there. And it's around Pili Valley Spring, which is this one right here. So this is a lot of text, but I'm just going to read it because it's a really cool story around how ʻAlae came into being, basically. So Kaakea was an important man from Molokai who built a house, and he's having a feast when he sees these strangers coming down the hill from the plains of Ho'olehua to Pili Valley. And the women are wearing pa'u dyed bright yellow with olena and kihei of the same color, and lepo'o of ma'o and ilima. And there's one man with them. So Kaakea calls out to them. The group comes, but only the man will enter, and they don't want to eat. They reveal that they are supernatural beings. And I like that the leader of the group was a lady. So Pua informs Kaakea that if he builds a house for them, they will become his akua. And their visible forms will be coconut shell vessels that they carry, and their ʻAlae bird forms, both of which they've left at Pili Valley. And then they disappear. So he does that. He builds the house, supplies it with food, bananas, clothing. He puts a kapu on it. The birds eat all of the offerings, and they show this gentle disposition in accepting them. I just thought that was such a lovely story, and this spring is desperately overgrown with mangrove, as is most of the south coast of Molokai, but it's underneath this enormous ahupua'a, just a very wide open plain, and you can kind of imagine this procession of people coming down. And this spring is pretty close to one of the potential sites for reintroduction of this bird to Molokai. So it kind of is all stitched together in my mind as, you know, hopefully being part of the future for this bird, as well as this really important past. So I wanted to now switch from the Mo'olelo and what we know from Hawaiian history to the research. And we've had a lot of great researchers come through. ʻAlae, also Charles Van Rees did a lot of work on Oʻahu, Bryn Weber most recently, who's the wildlife biologist there now. So this is a kind of summary of the key things that they have discovered. So, you know, we all know pairs maintain defended territories around their nesting areas, and they are very fierce. You just showed me that video where they're like, you know, having a go at each other if anybody turns up who's in their property. And when Bryn did the waterbird counts, the last one, she did a little section where she did playback. So you would listen for 5 minutes, just how many ʻAlae ʻUla do I count? But for the second 5 minutes, you would play the call of another bird. And you got a much bigger response. So I think it probably doubled how many birds you would have counted, roughly. But also some of the birds got so furious. They would come like rushing out and, you know, squawking and flapping their wings and then being like, get off my property. But interestingly, if the vegetation is dense, they can be pretty packed in there. So within tens of meters of each other, you can have multiple nests. So as long as they can't see each other and they're not kind of like straying, we can have pretty good density, which is good for conservation because, you know, it makes it easier to protect them. The other thing that Bryn found was there's a lot of cooperative breeding. So the older juveniles will be helping to feed the younger chicks. There might be 2 adults associated with the brood, sorry, more than 2 adults associated with a brood. And the chances are that increases survival, it teaches the next generation how to parent, and it protects them from predators. Bryn found that this kind of cooperative breeding occurred in about 5% of nests, but she thinks that might be an undercount because she wasn't always monitoring the initial laying part. She also found 3 adults feeding chicks in 8% of nests. And she found nest parasitism occurring. So other females going and dumping their eggs in somebody else's nest and then leaving them literally holding the baby. So some of her maximum clutch size was 15 eggs, which is crazy and kind of skews the numbers a little bit across the state. That gave her an average of 4. But these were probably, you know, some other lady being like, seems a lot easier for you to look after my babies rather than me. But she did find adults destroying eggs at a higher rate when there was nest parasitism and then eating the contents, which was pretty interesting. Eating them, literally pecking the egg and then, you know, sucking it out. And she also found that happening when she thought eggs had failed. So if they'd brooded them for more than 25 days, the parent then often destroyed and or ate the egg after that. In terms of foraging, they do a lot of picking in the mud, apparently stealing food from other birds, which I didn't know until I was writing this presentation and looking at the research. And they eat a pretty wide selection of things. And, you know, you guys have probably seen them. I've definitely seen them at some of the resorts. If people throw food out, they will come and eat it, which is, you know, dangerous because then they get run over, but they'll eat kitchen scraps. They'll eat, you know, a lot of things. What Charles Van Rees found was that our idea of what these birds need and what conservation needs to give them is at odds with reality to some extent. They're on the golf courses, they're in the wastewater, they're at the hotels, they're in urban marshes, like they are in human spaces because they have to be. Humans are managing water differently, you know, this is where it's wet and that is where they're going to be. I have a lady who emails me every year about her garden pond because the birds come and nest there. So we need to think differently about protection. You know, when every bird counts, which it does, how do we protect the ones that are not inside our nice fenced, you know, refuges and places where we're providing predator control? So Charles's summary was conservation of the species depends on working landscapes, not just protected areas. And loʻi are a huge part of that. You know, the birds are there, they're present in loʻi, and we need to make sure that farmers have what they need to protect them. Because the farmers are farming, you know, they will care about the birds, and they do care about the birds, but they need extra support if they're going to trap predators or do something beyond normal farming operations. So the top 5 actions across the state that conservation community feels like we need is predator-proof fencing. I put assess feasibility, but we've actually assessed the feasibility. Basically, we know it can be done. We know where we might want to do it, and now we need to get on with it. Controlling mongoose on Oʻahu. I forget about this because we are so lucky that that isn't an issue for us, but it is on Oʻahu. And actually, Tina was talking about chickens getting eaten in front of her. I was at a wetland site visit, and same thing, a mongoose basically ate a chick from under my feet. So they're definitely taking the ʻAlae ʻUla, you know, they're the same size as a chicken chick. Some additional research, and then, as I was saying, outreach to loʻi farmers and an exchange of information. They know a ton about them. How can we work together to protect them? And then identifying new habitats. And these are photos that Bryn took with her Nest cameras. Cool nest one, not so cool cat eating bird one. So yeah, reintroduction. And this was one of my favorites of the student work. It's so good. Don't let the fire go out. Love it. So there have been attempts to reintroduce these birds on both Maui, Molokai, and Hawaii in the 50s. I think there were 2 attempts on Molokai, one more recent. they all failed, and it was, you know, there's a number of reasons why, but I think it was probably an absence of ongoing management. I think some of the birds were lost to predation. There just wasn't enough support to really get them established. And also they'd been offspring of captive birds. That's probably important. They came from the zoo. So maybe they were not primed to go out there and survive on their own. So now they're only on Kauaʻi and Oʻahu. But we are planning reintroduction. So NIFWIF, which is the National Foundation for Wildlife Fund. I might be getting that wrong. Fish and Wildlife Foundation, yes. NIFWIF funded a reintroduction assessment, and what that came back with was that it might be possible in several sites, but there was nowhere that was ready. So we are working, Pacific Birds is working a lot on Molokai to try and get Hunalau Loko'ia up to the state where it could accept ʻAlae ʻUla. There's a Hawaii Land Trust site at Waihe'e, which is showing a lot of promise. Imakapa Pond on Hawaii Island, but there's still a lot to do. We're not there. And there's a lot to do on the sites that would be the donor sites as well to, you know, protect that population and boost their numbers. And just a plug for cats belonging indoors. On the Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge, over a 4-year period, there were 100 ʻAlae ʻUla identified as being killed by cats, amongst all these other species that were also lost to cats. That's just on our refuge, which is well managed and predator control is happening. So cannot stress enough how important that is. There's a number of bills that have been going through the legislature this time. Basically, that is our opportunity as citizens to comment on those bills, to give your opinion, and to let the legislator know that you would like cats to be indoors in Hawaii. And these are just some of the outreach materials that Pacific Birds has produced, just to kind of get that message out there. And NOAA is also doing a lot of work on the Pono cat parent campaign, just encouraging people to keep their dogs on a leash, keep their cats indoors. I'm feeling very passionate about dogs on a leash because I just got bitten by a pit bull on Friday. So yes, dogs on a leash, cats indoors. And then Hob provided this photo of cats near the moʻoli, our precious moʻoli. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to do there, but I do feel like the tide of public opinion is turning. People are getting it and supporting it and being vocal. I feel like wildlife supporters are being vocal about what they want to see happen on the landscape. So as I was saying, this is our year for the ʻAlae ʻUla, and art has been a great way to connect. So these student artworks were just absolutely phenomenal. It was really hard. We had 2 professional artists on our panel, which I was very grateful for, because it was too much responsibility for the US coordinator and myself to be like, how do we pick from all these amazing pieces of work? We are partnering with DOFOR, Division of Forestry and Wildlife, on their year of coastal kuleana. So we got to go and do a proclamation with the governor, who was very gracious and has had this visionary idea for the green fee, which is really going to fund a lot of this work. So very grateful to the governor for that. Him and the representatives were so into the stuffed birds and the kind of dressed up birds. It was really cool. And these were our winners of the competition after long debate. Olwen Fife of Island School produced this phenomenal piece of work, which I felt like I could just see in a museum on the left. And then Kai Kulnain with the mum bird giving the gift of fire to the next generation. So really love it. And this was another piece that just captured the idea of students thinking about what's needed and then being part of the solution. So I feel like this gives us all a lot of hope for the future, that we got 135 entries and I loved pretty much 135, every single one of them. This is Holly Kaikapu, and she's a Native Hawaiian artist inspired by the natural world. She does a lot of plant kind of block prints and things, and she produced this block print for us, which again I just absolutely love. The idea of the ʻAlae ʻUla in the tarot and kind of with this theme of fire. And then my son was press ganged into producing this cartoon, but I love this too. He, also got inspired by the fire thing with the idea of the flames coming out of the bird's head. And in fact, Holly had produced on one of the electricity boxes an ʻAlae ʻUla with flames coming that kind of like inspired Cal. So just trying to connect with kids. We have a bunch of these printed out. We're going to have a big cartoon on a board to try and get kids inspired to join this campaign. And this is kicking off really at Kukui Grove on the 4th of April. I'm hoping we will get a big turnout. So tell your friends, bring the family. It's a free event, games, prizes. We have AirPods, we have Vortex binoculars. We will have lots of other goodies. And we'll have 14 partner booths, including the Friends of Kauai National Wildlife Refuge, which we're excited about. NOAA will be there, Hawaii Audubon, PMRF, Holly's HK Experience, American Bird Conservancy, Machine, SOS, Ohia Love, did I forget anyone? DOFOR, and Kukui Grove are gracefully hosting us for that event, so we're very grateful to them. And then this is our flyer as well. So yeah, things to share on social media. We have a Facebook page, and this is an easy way to kind of get to the website, the bit.ly/ʻAlae-ʻUla. Yeah. And so just to wrap up, I feel like change is going to come when all of us make it happen, because I don't think we can necessarily rely on lots of federal funding certainly not in the short term. So making sure these birds are protected is going to be down to us. And you can help by getting your feet wet, volunteering. There is opportunities all the way from Kauaʻi and the Mana Plain down on the far west, all the way up to fantastic work that the Friends group does, getting volunteers out here. And actually, just a plug for that DOFOR sanctuary, if you haven't been down there for a long while, it is amazing. There's the Kauaʻi wetland, which is open all the time, and it's a sand pit. But they've expanded to an additional 50 acres, and it is packed with birds, rarities, migrants, these native Hawaiian waterbirds. So well worth going and visiting. Talking to other people about feral cats and how feeding them is not a good idea. There are weaknesses with TNR, so helping get that word out. And then, yes, letting everybody know about our Kukui Grove event and making that a big success. And if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, this is our website, and you can hit that and subscribe. And that is it.
Yeah. Just to confirm the idea for the translocation at this point. If you are looking towards the translocation, since you commented about them coming from captive zoo prior, will you definitely not be doing that?
Yes,
forward?
it
Okay,
definitely won't be zoo birds. I think the most likely options are ʻAlae, could be James Campbell, and then there's other sites where there's a lot of ʻAlae ʻUla, but maybe it's not the right place for them, not the most suitable kind of site. So it could be that birds get moved from sites where they're in danger, or it just would be better for whatever reason if they weren't there.
But still in their natural element, because
Yeah.
it reminded me of, forget which chapter, but in Carl Sapina's book, Becoming Wild, about the importance of the cultural learning over generations. And that would be something that would have been missed in the captive part, is my thinking, so.
Yeah, and it's interesting about the cooperative breeding as well, because you would think maybe it's fine to just take a pair and, you know, off they go and then they're going to breed. But if they've been used to having a third parent, you know, perhaps it has to be a whole community of birds that have been working together. And I think that's one of the big efforts that needs to happen, to band birds enough in advance and have studied them enough so that when you come to try and select which ones are going to go, you have a better handle on who's doing what and how are these birds interplaying with each other.
Yeah, so I definitely witnessed a lot of the juveniles do help the parents a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall I? Here we go. Well, this way then to you.
I'm just wondering if you have a copy or there's access to print out that Pono Pet sheet. I know a couple people, I'd like to sneak it into their door.
Leave it in their mailbox.
Because me saying it's not a good idea to let them run free doesn't change anything.
Yeah, we could
It's a
definitely
very,
print that out.
Personal.
Yeah, some of the materials, I'll check with you, see
Okay.
the one that you're visioning, but
Okay.
thanks to Helen, we do have that.
It was actually the checklist, the Pono.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we haven't, we can print some for sure. And get
Okay.
them to you.
Okay.
Using your voice.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That's really, I think it's very important for us to realize the embeddedness of the cultural history of these birds, and that gives people more of a reason to keep plugging away. But I'm curious to know, I'm always concerned when I go to ʻAlae to make sure that at sometimes you can really see the pesticides and the herbicides on the water. And I wonder, not only for the ʻAlae ʻUla, but also for other birds, how dangerous is that? And have we made much progress in working with the farmers to maybe lessen the impact of the chemicals?
Yeah, I don't think there's enough research to really know exactly what the impact is, but it stands to reason it can't be good for them. And I don't know a ton about the exact details of the best management practices that they have, but I know that the refuge was working hard on creating best management practices and then working with the farmers. And I think over time that is changing. That's what I hear from the managers, that the perhaps older school, what might be considered slightly more industrial farming, they seem like they're moving away a little bit from that to a more holistic approach.
Well,
And that is what we need.
At one time, pretty much, it was at one time pretty much no chemicals, and I wonder if that contributes to the decline of the numbers.
Yeah, I don't think we know.
Yeah.
I don't think we know if that's the case. There's not much water quality testing. In fact, we just had a meeting about it today to talk about how we need a coastal monitoring system across the whole of the state. We don't have that. We have people, different organizations doing different things on different islands.
Places, yeah.
We need something coordinated, and water quality could and should be part of that.
I have one other question, which is, how do the ʻAlae ʻUla interact, say, with fish ponds? Because I mean, Molokai, the south coast of Molokai has 8 or 9 fish ponds, pretty well restored, and some in better or worse condition. And of course, we have fish ponds here too. That are they at all comfortable in that setting, or do they eat the goodies? Right, they eat the goodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious as to what kinds of, we talk about working landscapes, what kinds of working landscapes will be most hospitable?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously the ocean kind of facing loʻi are going to be too briny, but ʻAlae fish pond definitely supports ʻAlae ʻUla and will support more. They have, basically their vision is to rebuild the entire system. It's not just the fish pond. They're pushing back into the watershed and up the river. And I've talked to Peleke about this, and he's, you know, sort of like, if you build the entire system again, that's the way to protect them. On the way, it's a bit bumpy because you have to cut down the veg, and then it's not ideal for the ʻAlae ʻUla, and there'll be a bit of a lull, but they will come back. And on Molokai, it's the question of, can we get enough fresh water back? Because they've had so much sedimentation, it's come down, filled in some of the fish ponds, and then gone out even further into the ocean. But we just did a project looking at the hydrology under that sediment, and the springs are still there.
Wow.
You know, there's fresh water pumping in some areas. So
Because you can see it on Google, you know, you can really see the depths and the different kind of sedimentation that affects things. So
yeah,
well, that's good news, I guess.
Yeah.
So they're not eating much in the way of fish.
I don't think they would pose a threat to what's going on in the fish pond. I think, you know, if they're eating fish, there would be small ones in the edge of the bank. You know, they're not dabbling, they're not going to be in the deeper water. So it's all really about the edge for them. And they, you know, they're so omnivorous, they can do pretty well anywhere. And I have never heard that there was any kind of conflict between people who were looking at fish ponds and having ʻAlae ʻUla. So I presume it's not too much of an issue.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Do we have any online? Any other questions from our room here?
I have one. I'm Mark. This is Susie. We're not, we're kind of ignorant on this subject. It sounded interesting, so we walked up here. Now I've got a question. Do we have like a predator control ways? Are there people in the valley that are looking for the predators and eliminating them or relocating them? Do we have things like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of predator control that happens. So the ideal is a predator-proof fence, and we do have some predator-proof fences, mainly in the mountains, at least on Kauaʻi, for the seabird colonies. But in Oʻahu, they have predator-proof fences around wetlands. And then there's automated traps for rats. So they're called good natures. They're kind of amazing. Basically the rat goes for the bait, gets hit by a bolt, and then the trap resets. So you don't need field workers out in the field. You can just take out rats basically until your CO2 canister runs out. But predator control is tough. It's hard work. It's constant. It's never ending. And if we can get fences, that's the ideal, really. Yeah. Yeah, as well. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of a fence for a cat. Is that possible?
It's possible. Yeah. So basically you can have a cat-proof fence, which has relatively wide mesh. So a rat-proof has almost like chainmail. But if it's for cats, it can be larger mesh, but it has a big floppy hood. So they can't scale up because the hood pushes them back. Which you know, fences are expensive. They have their own challenges. You have to maintain them. But the research shows that is still cheaper over, I think it was over a 30-year period than doing 30 years of predator control with people. Yeah.
Well, we invite you to come out to Kilauea Point, where we'd love to show off our predator fence out there that has amazing yet simple technology supporting multiple species of mammals that we're keeping out.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that's one of the biggest in the island.
At the moment, it's the biggest one in the state, but I heard we're about to get eclipsed, which is exciting.
Eclipsing you then?
I think it's Oahu, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, James Campbell.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good problem.
That will be amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that fence, they now have 100 bristle-side curlew turn up every year because they have this amazing protected resting area for those migratory birds. So when you build it, they do come.
Yeah. I wanted to applaud you that when I've been able to enjoy going out into the community and doing outreach, meeting the community where they are, and in particular, engaging young people is so important. And I remember several times when I went out and was talking to teenagers, and I got some really great challenges. Like, I've seen these birds before. Why should I care? I was like, that is an excellent question.
It is a good question.
And I had to really dig deep. But you are meeting them where they are with this inspirational artwork project and things that bring that information to them. And I really applaud the work you're doing and the excitement of this year that highlights the species and
I'm
raises
excited.
the profile. And
Yeah.
one last plug for the way that we're trying to work all together. And Helen was a really important part of this this conversation as well. From over a year ago, when the fish and wildlife system got hit by the federal destaffing, one of the things that we were talking about was like, what is, from the losses of staff members at that time, where was the top critical places to put resources from the private sector to help fill in those gaps? And looking at ʻAlae and looking at the data, I think at least anecdotally could say, when the resources were there and they were able to manage those lands effectively, which is so amazing to observe, relatively simple work, but when you create the right conditions for these species, they just thrive. And that's the whole point of this.
Yeah.
And over time, when the resources were there, the numbers raised, and when the resources are not, obviously you're seeing some of that. And anyway, for us as a friends group, one of the key positions that was lost was a boots on the ground habitat maintenance specialist, a guy who would be mowing, clearing ditches, managing different levels of wetlands based upon the needs throughout the year of the different species. And it's taken us now almost a year to get there, but we now have an offer out on a position that is privatizing one of those positions that was lost from the federal government's destaffing. Thanks to the generosity of our community, we're trying to plug a hole and have that space, like you said. One big part of this as well is making sure that ʻAlae survives and succeeds in its mission. And so again, I thank you for your partnership and the work that you're doing to allow us to get to this place a year later.
So important. It's amazing, that progress.
Yeah, so we're super excited about that. And it's only possible thanks again to the love and generosity of our community. So had to just share that bit of update. So
Yep.
a bit of progress for sure. Anything else from online before we close? Well then, thank you all for being here. Helen, thank you so much. Round of applause. And we'll see you next month as we talk story about the history of our beloved lighthouse. So thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. All right, choose your clicky.